Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated legacy action. It's been a little while, so I thought I'd jump back into my beloved Green-Black Turbodepths. This is a deck where we win by making a 20/20, we remove all the counters with Hexmage or make a copy with Thespian stage, we have tutors to make that happen, we have ways of protecting it, and we have some hand disruption to make sure it gets there, along with some fast mana, and a few silver bullets in the mana, like Bojuka Bog, Boseiju, Ghost Quarter, Sejiri Steppe. That's the basic deck. I play this a lot on my channel. I have a massive guide that's over 50 pages on my Patreon. If you're interested, take a look. But I thought I'd play this build. And last build we played had Once Upon a Time. So what I've decided to try this time around is we're trying a build that has more protection. So the Once Upon a Time means that you're more reliable and slightly quicker. It's about half a turn to a turn quicker, because you can sort of string the pieces together for going off slightly quicker usually. But we're trying a build that has more protection. So we've cut the 3 Once Upon a Times, and we've added in some more hand disruption and another Not of This World. So it's similar, there's 3 cards different, but we're trying to max out on our ways of interacting with the opponent and see how that feels. Because there's a lot of decks that need interacting with, and we're just sort of trying different things. I think I'm probably still at the moment on the Once Upon a Time build, but it's important to try these other builds out and test how they feel. Sideboard wise, we have dropped our Disruptor Flute, because the best deck in the format that most people are playing is the blue-black Rescaminator deck, which, you know, is still around. But that deck is cutting down on Wastelands because they're not very good in the mirror. So, because there's fewer Wastelands, we don't need the 5th Pithing Needle effect. And our Graveyard Hate is going to be the Surge Extraction, because we're not running Once Upon a Time, which means we don't need Fairy Macabre in the sideboard. We want a piece of Graveyard Hate that can work differently around this. This also allows us to peek our opponent's hand, which can be really important in the blue-black Rescaminator matchup as well. So we can board this in for those matchups. Because we don't have the Once Upon a Time, we're, instead of playing 3 Collector Ouphe, we're playing 2 Null Rod and 2 Collector Ouphe. So Disruptor Flute is something that can be like a bit like a Null Rod, as well as also being there for the Wastelands. But because we're getting rid of the Disruptor Flute, we're putting in the Null Rod in its place, so we have 4 Null Rod effects. We've got our usual 4 Abrupt Decay to mess with permanents that are problems for us. Harbinger of Tides, Magus of the Moon, sorry, Harbinger of the Seas, Magus of the Moon, Blood Moon, Opposition Agent, that sort of jam, Snaring Bridge. We have 1 of Sylvan Safekeeper to protect our stuff when we're going, Duress to take a look at our opponent's hand, and we're playing a spicy one today. I had someone suggest to me to play Gloom a few times back in the day, and it's quite an expensive card for what it does, but the sort of white controlling matchup is pretty horrible. So having this card come into play is a card that they're going to have to spend a lot of mana on if they want to try and remove something like a Prismatic Ending, and it's just going to shut off a lot of swords to plowshares and stuff like that, because 3 mana is a lot. Now, is this card what we should be playing? Probably not, but we're going to test out if we come across any white matchups. It's always worth testing some cards, and, you know, hosers back in the day, boy howdy were they hosers. And that's pretty much where we're at. So like and subscribe, and let's just jam right in with my beloved Marit Lage. Right, so on the play, we have a turn 1 Thoughtseize, a turn 2 Sylvan Scrying, a turn 3 Hexmage, turn 4 win, in theory. That is on the slightly slower side, but because we have a second Scrying, we can also push through some scary things like a blocker of some description. So I think we're going to keep this one. It's a little bit slower than I would ideally like, but we at least have some potent tools here, and we can go and get Swamp doors. And we can also play around a Daze using the Spirit Guide that might surprise our opponent. So we need to get black and black off this. So this is going to be Swamp into Bayou, I believe. So basic Swamp. Let's fire off this Thoughtseize. There's some decks that can kill you on turn 1, so I think it's worth doing the Thoughtseize here. It lets us know what sort of game plan we've got to set up for, and if we need to Sylvan Scrying something peculiar. Alright, Galvanic Relay, Galvanic Relay, Galvanic Relay, Ponder Brainstorm. Well, we don't want them to fix this hand, so I'm going to take this Brainstorm and leave them with a hand that needs some help. Obviously they can ponder, but they're still going to have these bunch of Galvanic Relays that don't do anything, whereas the Brainstorm would let them put some relays back and turn them into actual go cards. So I think we're going to see a blue source that casts a Ponder here. We also don't have to worry about our opponent messing with our mana here, because a Galvanic Relay deck is not going to be doing that. It's going to be trying to combo us off. I believe we're playing against some sort of variant of the Epic Storm, which basically is a fetch land storm deck. Lion's Eye Diamond. Okay, so they're playing that out so we can't discard it. They've already seen discard from our deck. That makes perfect sense. Ghost Quarter. Our opponent does not have any basics in their deck. But if we Ghost Quarter now, that sets us back a turn, because we need to play this land and the next land. So I think we're just going to continue with the plan here. So this is get a Bayou, cast a Sylvan Scrying, go and get your friend of mine, Dark Depths, Bloodstained Mire. So this can fetch a... Alright, so we got an Echo of Eons. Do I want to fire off an Elvish Spirit Guide just for mana? I think that's a good idea in case we find a crop rotation. Well, our hand still goes, but our opponent's got a full grip of cards to be working with here. There is a Brainstorm, so they clearly need a little bit more help with it. This might also represent Veil of Summer to our opponent, which might make them take a suboptimal line, which we might be able to buy ourselves an extra turn with. Our opponent is favoured game 1 in this matchup for sure. We have some Thoughtseizes and stuff that can poke a hole in what our opponent's doing, as we try to. Right, we got a couple of Dark Rituals going now. Another Dark Ritual. A Mox Opal. So this is where we have the 4 Collector Ouphe style cards. Lion's Eye Diamond. Let's have a look. Storm is 7. Beseech the Mirror. This can just go get Tendrils and point it at our dome. And that's the end of the game. Yep, there it is. So something I didn't mention in the deck tech is we are running these Inquisition of Kozilek instead of the Duresses. The Duresses are better into like the matchups like Carnforge and Storm like we're playing against here. But we're going to be losing those matchups quite often game 1 anyway. So the idea is that we have these which are better against a lot of the removal in the format. And also people trying to commit to the board early, where it's actually more of a real game with like Eldrazi and stuff like that. So that's why the Inquisition of Kozilek is better. And then we board into some better tools here for these matchups, like the Null Rods and Collector Ouphes, because I don't think we're winning those matchups game 1 anyway. So these are some of the tools we have available to us. I'm not a big fan of having Pithing Needle here. Sometimes Wishclaw Talisman is the thing we want to name, and I also don't like the Not of This World. Surgical Extraction is a thing we can look to, especially since we have access to lots of hand disruption here. We can try and shut off fetch lands with Pithing Needle, but that doesn't feel great. We can try and shut off Wishclaw Talisman, but a lot of these decks don't run it now. This doesn't shut off any of the artifact mana because this specifically states non-mana abilities. Now, sometimes you get cheeky, you play this, you name Lion's Eye Diamond and hope your opponent doesn't know. But that's not what we're going for here. We're going to bring in a couple of the extractions to help with their graveyard plan. And we're just going to rely on Null Rods, Collector Ouphes, and Discard to do most of the work for us. Now, we're keeping the Lotus Petals in because casting the Null Rod and Collector Ouphe ahead of curve is worth it. And yeah, if that makes us have some dead draws, that's fine. We don't really need the Ghost Core and Sejiri Steppe here. So we could try and get a third Surgical Extraction if that's how we feel. The Bojuka Bog is fine because we can get that in response to some pieces. I think I'll take out a Ghost Quarter for a Surgical here. So if our opponent goes for a Guy's Will line, we can then tutor up the Boseiju. So what does our hand do? We can make our opponent discard. We can tutor for half our combo, but then we're not really doing anything. So I think we have to mulligan. This is a turn 1 Null Rod. And if we find some black mana, we get to do some other stuff, but the turn 1 Null Rod is very strong here. So I think we're probably shipping away this Inquisition because we can't cast it, whereas we can cast the Surgical. So 2 mana sources give us a 20/20. 1 Urborg gives us a 20/20. So we're not a million miles away from doing what we're doing. But this is a relatively skewed matchup. We have to make sure we don't lose because our opponent's clock is going to be faster than ours almost every game. Thespian Stage. Lotus Petal. Let's make an annoying artifact for our opponent to deal with. And we'll pass. That is an Underground Sea and a pass. Our opponent can still play out artifacts. And the reason I like Null Rod more than... Okay, this is a good draw for us, obviously. So the reason I like Null Rod more than things like Vexing Bauble for decks like this is they can just play a Veil of Summer and just go through what we're assembling. Our opponent doesn't have Veil of Summer here. They can Brainstorm in response and hide cards. Yep. But we can shuffle the cards that they're putting on top, that they actually want. So this can be a nice 1-2 punch. Chromox, Ponder, Ponder. Okay, so we're going to give our opponent a real bad time here. We don't want our opponent to draw the card on top, so we're doing this now. Take this. Take this. Take this one. Anything unusual here? They did board in a couple of Chain of Vapor. That's interesting. That's not a thing that always happens, because they need to make sure they have enough veils and things. And they've gone up on Boseijus. 1, 2, 3, 4 cards in our opponent's hand. So our opponent kept a... put the good cards on top with the Brainstorm and we just shuffle them away. So that exchange for us was pretty bananas. But Storm decks can do a lot from nothing. So we do need to be cautious. I'll play out this Verdant Catacombs. I don't want our opponent to know how dead they are. And our opponent can't easily cast the Echo of Eons here to shuffle away this Dark Depths. So the one backfire for us would be if they Commercial District to put an Echo of Eons into the graveyard. That would go bad. We don't have any Surveil lands, we can't fetch for this. I will try a build with a Surveil land soon. I don't think it's good, but we should try it. Out our win condition and pass. Our opponent's got 3 blanks in hand. Now these still generate Storm, they just don't activate for mana. There's a Chrome Box. I suspect this is not getting anything imprinted on it. A Dark Ritual. So this could just be a small Tendrils to gain some life. A Beseech the Mirror. Okay. So they can go and get the Song of Creation. Okay, so as soon as we get an opportunity, we need to blow this up with this Boseiju. Our opponent casts anything here. Because our opponent can just combo off from this. If you're unfamiliar with this one, every spell they play, they draw some stuff. And it just goes out of hand in a big way. Okay, do I want to do anything to deal with our opponent's Chain of Vapor? I don't think that's what I care about here. I think the way boarded is for the best. No Gloom in this matchup, unfortunately. I want to try that Gloom out and ruin someone's day with it. So our hand has a turn 1 Collector Ouphe. We're also pretty close to being able to combo off because we've got 2 tutors here. So I will keep this. Now we can just lose the game on turn 1. That is a fact of life. Alright, Undercity Sewers. We're unlikely to lose the game on turn 1 if they're playing an Undercity Sewers. So that gives them no starting mana without artifacts. There's a Chrome Mox. Now they're playing this to get stuff out of their hand. Okay, so they're playing this so they can Veil of Summer. So we're getting a 2-form with our Collector Ouphe here. Alright, that's not a bad one to find. This is going to become a Bayou. Play this one out. And let's get Collector Ouphe up in their business. This is what I mean about the matchup improving significantly post-board. We have these big haymakers. We have a combo next turn if we want it. Because we crop rotate this into an Urborg, play the Dark Depths, play the Hexmage. Alright, our opponent's had enough there. And I don't blame them. Like I said, we have the big haymakers here. And this is the matchup where we normally win 2-1, but we get crushed in game 1. Alright, let's go to round number 2. This is not going to be a keeper from me. That's an easy mulligan. Just one coming to play tap source. No, thank you. We have a discard spell. A black source gives us access to the Hexmage to do depths that way. We have the Thespian stage as well. We can keep this and we bottom the Sejiri Steppe. So we have an uncounterable line with one other piece of mana. We have Protection. We have Disruption. This is not the fastest hand in the world, but this is the build we're playing. We're playing a slightly slower build with more interaction. Okay, I don't care about being duressed here. Beseech the Mirror is clearly the card we're taking, so get out of here. Have I just queued into Stormtown or something? Many, many storms coming my way. I've actually been having thunderstorms here for the last few days, so... Alright, so the Duress takes land off this well because it can't take anything else. There's a Bauble. They get to cycle this one. I'm curious to see if they play out the Lion's Eye Diamond. Because they played a basic Swamp, I'm expecting Saga Storm, so I'm not expecting Relay, so I'd be expecting this Lion's Eye Diamond to come down. Oh wow, what a draw. Sometimes you run hot, and you just gotta enjoy it. Alright, it's your turn to go, opponent. You've got 3 mystery cards, that could be enough to go here. They disagree. Alright, so now we managed to actually win game 1, and we get to do our busted sideboard plan. So we chuck these in, we get rid of these things, we get rid of these things, and we can get rid of a Ghost Quarter especially, since they've got mono black stuff going on there. Now, yeah, we've seen the swamps in there. Do we think our opponent has anything that makes us want to Abrupt Decay? I don't believe so. Like, the Saga Storm decks tend not to be about that life. Like, they can have some permanents we want to disrupt. So, like, a Pithing Needle could be annoying for us. I think we're just fine with what we've got here. Now, actually, do you want the Ghost Quarter just for the Sejiri? Just for the Urza Saga, actually. Now, sometimes it becomes relevant for us to Ghost Quarter the Urza Saga. And they're unlikely to target our creature with anything. They're more likely to make us sacrifice it. Alright, we have a turn 1 Null Rod, which is exactly what we're looking for in this matchup. So I will keep this and hope our opponent doesn't just dress out of our hand. But that is very much a real possibility. Vault of Whispers. Here comes the Thoughtseize. It's a Duress. Goodbye, Null Rod. We have the crop rotation, which can cover a graveyard-based line using the Gaia's Will. So there is that. It does mean that we have to hold up our mana. We can't just go and tutor for a land right now and be shields down. So I'll play this Bayou and pass. There is an Ancient Tomb, a Mox Opal, sure. A Lion's Eye Diamond. We don't really get ways to strip the graveyard if they're doing Echo Vions here, because as soon as they crack this, they get priority. But we can stop their graveyard if they're going to do a Guy's Well line. Or we can make the Cabal rituals add less mana. But we have to be pretty sure that mana is the gate if we're doing that. So we could see a Beseech the Mirror this turn. A Wishclaw Talisman. Oakley dokley. There's the Wishclaw. And Ad Nauseam. Ad Nauseam's a good one. We could Ghost Quarter our opponent's land here to try and give them less lands to hit, so they're more likely to lose the game themselves, but we're just going to let them carry on here. Lots of zeros, a 1, a 0, more zeros. They do need to find some higher CMC stuff, or mana values now, just so they can actually put a win on the stack. Present, this is probably is enough to win, right? 2 Lion's Eye Diamonds. Yeah, like our opponent's got lots of life to work with. This should be a win for them. But we get to see more of their deck, so I'm very much... Yeah, so there's the Bauble. So Storm is very much lethal. And they have 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They have enough stuff to kill us here. I'm not going to make them show us the tendrils. Alright. I don't think anything changes with what I've seen here. Now we could bring in Abrupt Decays or the Pithing Needles for the Wishclaw. Is that better than the Surgicals? Possibly. Like, we already have our Null Rod effects, which is kind of what we're going for. I think we'll keep the Surgicals in as is. Just does not do what we are looking for here. This is a discard. Pretty close to killing our opponent. We can discard and then turn to try and kill our opponent if we feel that's good enough. So let's get to Bayou. I think we are looking at getting rid of this Boseiju, because we might need to double discard on turn 1. But having a second land is really important here. Alright, I'm going to get rid of the Petal here. Make sure we got 2 lands, because we do actually need a critical mass of lands. This means we've got to have Thoughtseize into Inquisition be good enough. If our opponent plays out something like a Wishclaw, we can obviously crack it with a Boseiju. That will give them mana. Right, let's go and get our Bayou. It's Thoughtseize, because that lets us hit anything. What do we have here? Infernal Tutor, Thoughtseize, Dark Ritual. So there is a line here where we take the Lotus Petal, and our opponent doesn't have mana unless they draw a land next turn. If we take the Lotus Petal, our opponent can't Thoughtseize us, and then our Inquisition is quite likely to do something. However, if they do draw a land, let's say they draw a Vault of Whispers, they can play this, Dark Ritual, Thoughtseize, Infernal Tutor, crack this. Or they could go land this, make 4 mana, cast this, crack this, cast Ad Nauseam. Not a big fan of these things happening. It's kind of interesting what we go for here. Like, the highest payout here is if we go for the Lotus Petal. We could go for the Lion's Eye Diamond, so they have to use Lotus Petal to Thoughtseize us. And that takes away their biggest chunk of mana. I think that's what we're going for here, actually. Like, our opponent has lots of different draws they can chase, but this takes them off of Metalcraft and can cause them some issues. Like, if they want a Lotus Petal Thoughtseize us, that's quite a big chunk out of their resources, because this is their only other artifact, so Metalcraft becomes further away. Alright, so now we get to use our Inquisition here. Not quite where we need to be, but we're getting there. Okay, we're going to Inquisition our opponent now, and then we can take their Tutor. Okay, they have a Beseech the Mirror. That's a pretty good one too. So we need to find a Dark Depths or an Urborg or any black source. So that's a lot of cards in our deck. Do I want to start pressuring our opponent's life total because they are an Ad Nauseam deck? The only problem with doing this is that if we tutor for a Dark Depths, if we tutor for a Urborg, so we can deploy the Hexmage, and then we draw an Urborg or something, we haven't actually improved our clock at all. Whereas if we wait till we draw either one, we can then make a more informed decision. I'd rather not tutor for black mana, I'd rather tutor for the Dark Depths. If our opponent tries to Thoughtseize us, we will cast a Crop Rotation response. Okay, is this a go turn? A Thoughtseize. I'm going at the Dark Depths. That is the most important card for us actually winning the game here. So our opponent didn't go for a Dark Ritual here. So unless they have more mana in hand, they can't be putting a Beseech the Mirror on the stack. They can get rid of our Spirit Guide. Yeah, there you go. Alright, this is the time to draw a black source. I knew we were going to draw the Dark Depths. As soon as you tutor for one, you automatically draw the other one. but we can't really win without the Dark Depths. I don't think the clock of these beaten down as 2/2s is quick enough when we don't have a permanent like Collector Ouphe or Null Rod in play. Adding green mana. Gaia's Will has been suspended. There's a clock on the game. Alright. Let's go and get ourselves a Bayou. Play a Hexmage. This tells our opponent they need to go now. Not the 4 turns time when the Gaia's Will comes off suspend. So they don't have Metalcraft anymore. But they needed to dig to find some more cards. They can still cast a Dark Ritual. So 1 mana source plus a Dark Ritual gives them Beseech the Mirror. That is a mana source. That is a very good artifact. Our opponent might be able to do it from here. There's a Dark Ritual. They can Beseech the Mirror, sacrifice whatever they want here. And Ad Nauseam. Our opponent should be able to win the game from here. Right, so there's a Thoughtseize. I just accidentally clicked away. Feed the Swarm. Infernal Tutor. Mox Opal. Duress. Thoughtseize. Quite a lot of stuff going on here. That's got to be enough from this point. I think our opponent has it. Because they can Dark Ritual, Infernal Tutor. I guess they need to get their Storm count up, so they need a few more zeros. Ooh, they drew the Tendrils, though. They should still be fine here, though, right? They got a bunch of mana. Just play all their zeros out, and then they can just Ritual out into the Tendrils here. Yep, our opponent got us there. We needed to not brick for a little bit, but we're both playing combo decks where a single top deck can change the outcome of the game entirely, and that's what happened. We drew the Dark Depths instead of any black source, and it's okay. That happens. Let's go to round 3. Our hand here is a weird looking one. I don't think I want to be keeping this one though. We don't have any access to green. We have no guarantee we can go off, and we have lots of hands where we do have that guarantee. So, well, we seem to have opened another stinker here, so we're going to go to 5 cards. Turn 1, Thoughtseize. Turn 2, Sylvan Scrying. Turn 3, Make a Guy. I think that's acceptable enough to me. Probably getting rid of that, and probably has to be the Thoughtseize here. So only get 1 crack at our opponent's hand here. An Underground Sea and a Netherglow. So we're looking at some sort of blue-black tempo deck. A forest. I don't think about that forest life. Let's take a peek what's going on over there. A Bowmasters, a Brainstorm, a Daze. None of these really make a huge difference to me. Like, we can take the Bowmasters and slow the clock. We can take the Brainstorm. I think it's the Brainstorm. Like, because none of the cards really matter, we take the thing that turns them into things that do matter. So we can Sylvan Scrying. Our opponent's likely to daze that, but we can pay with a surprise Spirit Guide. This is just the clock our opponent's working with. That's not really going to do that much for us. Against us, even. Psychic Frog, on the other hand. That's going to amp the clock. They can discard a creature here to attack us for an additional point of damage. They did not want to do that. Okay. I'm going to play this one out with the intention of playing Dark Depths next turn and using the Spirit Guide. So we need to fade the Wasteland for 1 turn here. And unlike the Rescaminator, these builds tend to run the 4 Wastelands. Whereas the Rescaminator is a deck that is currently cutting its Wastelands because they're not as good in the mirror. Right, there goes the Bowmasters. That's worth 2 damage, so it's the same as casting it. They could have discarded last turn to force an additional point of damage. They're discarding a land. They're left with just Daze in hand. So we get attacked for some here. So because of Wasteland, we have to make our creature in the upkeep. I don't think I want to just play this into a Daze. We're just going to use the Spirit Guide here. And then in our opponent's upkeep, we're going to make our little friend. I say little. It's quite a large friend. Alright, so we know our opponent has 2 cards in hand. We know one of them is Daze. Are they going to have their 1 to 2 of Brazen Borrower straight up? Let's find out. They do. They always do, don't they? Alright. Things are now very difficult. So this is 4, 5, 6, 7, and they just pump it, and we die. Sure. Yikes. So this is the matchup where it used to be you didn't need Abrupt Decays, but now we do, because they have access to Harbinger of the Seas. So Not of This World is a thing that protects us against Borrower. Inquisition is the thing that discards the Borrower. So this is one of those awkward ones where we have to kind of trim stuff. So normally you would trim like on some fast mana, but because of the Harbinger of the Seas, you now don't get to do that. That's another bit of an annoying one. We don't actually need Bojuka Bog for this matchup because they're not doing graveyard stuff, so that gets us 1 Abrupt Decay. And then we're probably trimming away on some of the little bits here and just having a nibble at various sections of our deck. So we get rid of one of those and grab one of those. Get rid of this world and have an Abrupt Decay. And we're probably just going to have the 3 in there. They tend to run like about 2 Harbinger of the Seas at most. So we have more answers than they have copies, but they have cantrips. Also, we can win underneath it. We can Inquisition. Our deck is generally very good against Delver style decks. It's one of the reasons to play the depth strategy in the first place, is you tend to run over all the sort of Delver decks. But, you know, there's a number of games where they do happen to have the borrower when they need it, and you don't happen to have the thing that stops the borrower. And that's life. Well, well, well. That is an interesting Magic the Gathering hand, isn't it? So this is Swamp, Lotus Petal, Crop Rotate to turn 2 for a Hexmage. It has some issues, but I'm going to keep this one. Right, so we're going to play our Lotus Petal here, so we have access to green mana, so we can Crop Rotate away this Urborg if our opponent wants to fight it. A Thoughtseize. Our hand is quite Thoughtseize redundant, so I'm just going to let this one slide. Would love to find a piece of hand disruption this turn, so we could disrupt their hand and then Crop Rotate it away and have a jolly good time about it. Pithing Needle. That's not the one, is it? Now we could try and be cheeky and get this Polluted Delta. I don't think that's where my heart lies. This is somewhat free to do. Force of Will is obviously a blowout here. They did not have it. Weird. You Force of Will that, but not the... So you Force of Will that, but not the Crop Rotation. That is curious. Alright, we're going to name Wasteland over here. Now we could get cheeky and name this Polluted Delta. And if our Hexmage resolved, then I would name the Polluted Delta, because that stops them having the mana to cast Brazen Borrower. But now we need a little bit more time. I think we need to name the Wasteland so we don't get our plan cut from underneath us. Right, our opponent's pondering, trying to get towards something. Whether that's going to be Wastelands, more counter magic, Brazen Borrowers. They got some time there. But we could top deck a green source. We could top deck a green stage. We could top deck a Vampire Hexmage. We have a lot of outs here that get us where we need to go. We have a green source. Our opponent knows our hands. They know this is a thing that we have the ability to do. They did not shuffle off their ponder though. So I am somewhat reluctant to attempt to go off just yet. We're not under any pressure. We can wait till we find a piece of discard. We've got enough of it in our deck. Psychic Frog. See, now we are under pressure. Do we play into a potential Force of Will here? Is it more important to keep green mana or black mana here as well as another consideration? I do want to cast this. If we get rid of this, we just win now. If we tap this for mana first, we can get rid of the Urborg. I think we want to tap this for black first. And this for black. And then we get rid of the Urborg here. This does take us down 2 mana if this doesn't work though. Have you got another Force? This plays around Force of Negation by doing it on our opponent's turn. We'll pay. So this means we don't get to go off right away now. But we have an uncounterable 2020 if we find a mana source. We did not find a mana source. Well, sure. There was that discard that we were looking for. So this is where things start going a bit pear-shaped for us. Because our opponent is now going to start drawing an additional card every turn. So they're getting double the resources we are to work with. Now, the one saving grace for us is that our opponent is looking for very specific things. We get to ignore a lot of what our opponent's deck does. Especially with what we have in play now. We're just looking for mana and then we're fine. So our opponent's counter spells and things won't work. And their Wastelands won't work because of the Needle. So they're very much just trying to look for the borrower. And we do get some information as to what's in our opponent's hand when we make the 2020. Or, you know, if we go to our opponent's turn, they don't attack with the frog, that means they're on Chump Block Town. Oh, Lord. Sure. So our decision to keep the Boseiju over the Urborg is costing us. But the chance of us drawing into more mana, because it's the most abundant thing in our deck, is very likely. The chance of drawing into specifically green mana is a lot less than drawing into mana. So we took the odds of we'll draw into some mana. And that's not what's happened here. Right, our opponent's got some Brainstorm action going on. Got to hope that Brazen Borrower is the very bottom card of the library. If that's the case, then we're probably fine. But they might have some things like Sheoldred's Edict we also have to consider. We can draw another Urborg, we can use that, we can Inquisition their hand and do our combo. Alright, they're shuffling after their Brainstorm. Not surprised to see a basic in our opponent's deck. Feels like they're gearing up to play a Harbinger of the Seas. Alright, deck, what have you got for us? A Pithing Needle. That's not the most useful thing I've ever seen. Alright, we can double up on the Wasteland ones. They at least can't bounce this and then blow some stuff up. The other option here is to name Psychic Frog, so our opponent can't grow it, and they can't make it fly. But that leaves us very cold to bouncing this. But that means they need specifically Borrower and Wasteland. Whereas this way, if we name the Psychic Frog... Alright, I'm going to name the Psychic Frog, I think. This means they're immediately going to borrow this and start wastelanding us, but... We've been falling by the wayside on decisions in terms of going against the numbers here. Like, they're probably going to keep their Borrower just so they can mess with our Marit Lage rather than trying to mess with our lands via a bounce on the Pithing Needle and wastelanding us. That would be my assumption here. They still get to draw cards. Pithing Needle doesn't stop that, but it stops the Psychic Frog flying, so it can't chump block. Here is the Harbinger of the Seas that I mentioned was on the horizon. So now we need to draw a green source, a black source, and an Abrupt Decay. That is a turn away from where I wanted that to be, really. Okay. So we have a relevant card in the Sylvan Scrying. If we find the forest, this finds us the swamp. So we have our sources, but we need to find them. And we don't have the biggest clock, and our opponent is probably going to be able to counterspell this. Alright. Psychic Frog, it's cracking in. Nethergoyf adding some additional power to the board. And I think our goose is well and truly cooked here. So this is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is going to put us to 2. Nope, I think we're done there. Yeah, that was a bit brutal. Again, these sorts of matchups are, generally speaking, the reason to play this deck. Now, obviously, blue-black at the moment is very, very pushed. Like, Psychic Frog is one of the all-time greatest creatures ever printed in Magic the Gathering, I think, in terms of its cost and what it does. So, it is a little bit of an uphill struggle sometimes, especially since when things go a little bit awry for us, we face tank a few hits and use our life total as a resource. Problem with doing that against a deck with Psychic Frogging is that they're getting a Howling Mine out of it. But we had a weird break where we went for the line where we don't immediately get to go off if they have the days, but we obviously didn't know what they were playing. So I wanted to keep the green source in case they had a Force of Will, so then any tutor becomes live for us. But that's just not what happened. And then we ended up needing to draw a land, and we just didn't draw a land for all those turns. So it is one of those things that happens. Let's go to round 4. So this hand gives us Disruption on turn 1 with an Inquisition. Then it allows us to get the Sylvan Scrying or the crop rotation to get towards where we need to be. I think we keep this one. So we lead off on the Urborg here, because this means that if we draw a Hexmage, we can just win next turn. We are going to be firing this Inquisition off into our opponent. Let's see what you got. Alright, we're one of those players, aren't we? So we've got Entomb, Reanimate, Thoughtseize, Animate Dead. We take the Entomb so we don't get hit by any of the big scary monsters. So this looks like traditional Reanimator. But to be fair, all these cards are in blue-black, so they might not be traditional. If we crop rotate, our opponent is probably going to take the crop rotate if they see this hand, which I imagine is what's going to happen here. They have a big monster in the troll. They could always just fire that off. Okay, they're targeting us, which is better than if they target themselves, I guess. Because that could mean a monster, although we can Bojuka Bog, but I'd rather not use my tutors that I need to win the game with in order to stop our opponent winning the game. Obviously, I will do that if I have to, but it's not really where I want to be. A Lotus Petal was our opponent's draw for turn. This will turn into a Troll of Khazad-dûm. Then they can reanimate it next turn. And that's not a clock that we're particularly worried by. Not of this world. Sure, so we're going to need access to several things along the way here. So we're going to get the important card here to be mana efficient because we might be under the gun a little bit. And we don't know if this is going to get Thoughtseize out of our hand. So we have to go and get the most important piece, which has less copies of effectively. Because all of our tutors get Dark Depths. And all of our tutors get Thespian Stage or whatever. But we also have Hexmage on top of that. So we end up with more pieces of the other half rather than Dark Depths. So spending our time getting Dark Depths is statistically the right play to do there. We're going to see the Swamp. This also shows us that our opponent is a more classic Reanimator rather than blue-black. So here comes the Swamp. We're going to see an Animate Dead on the Troll, or is it going to be an Reanimate? They're going for the Reanimate. That's not the mana efficient play, but the clock is going to be the same either way, right? It's going to be 4 turns unless we crack a fetch. What have we got here? A Sylvan Scrying. Okay, this is a-okay with me. So let's cast the Scrying. Go and get ourselves the Thespian Stage. And next turn, we get to make a 20/20. We've got some protection. I don't believe our opponent is going to do anything that requires this. One thing we have to worry about is an Archon of Cruelty. but they will have to chomp block with the Archon of Cruelty. So we get to Inquisition as well as doing all of our things here. So I will take that. Let's have another look. Grizzlebrand, Animate Dead. Okay. So like I said, this troll is not going to be a clock that bothers us. Having main deck Graveyard Hate in our deck is quite useful. Alright, our opponent's scooping it up, and we're going to game 2. So, these decks sometimes play Magus of the Moon, which makes me potentially want some Abrupt Decays. Obviously, we want the Graveyard Hate in Surgicals, and the Duresses look pretty good here too, because we can't accidentally hit a big monster with it either. Same with Inquisition, doesn't hit the big monster by accident. In terms of what we need to do against our opponent's stuff, I don't believe we need these Not of This World. Our opponent isn't really going to be targeting our creatures. The Pithing Needles, they can name Grizzlebrand, and that's about it in terms of things we care about. Now, that is a thing we do care about, but we want to be fighting them on the stack a bit more. So we're going to trim this sort of way, and then we have to decide where the next 2 cuts come. Maybe it just is the 2 Pithing Needles, and we try and fight the graveyard with our other bits and pieces. Boseiju can hit an Animate Dead. Do we need the Ghost Quarter? I don't think we need the Ghost Quarter, actually. So let's bring in an Abrupt Decay. We haven't seen our opponent playing red mana, actually. Maybe this is a little bit premature. Maybe they're... Oh, they might be on a similar build to the one we played recently, which had the... It might even be yesterday for you lovely people on the channel, where they had the pivot plan to Witherbloom Apprentice. So I think I'd rather hedge on the Abrupt Decay side of things. Well, this is going to beat the graveyard, and it's going to beat the other plan, and it's got our combo in. Yeah, I'll take this. This is where they immediately Cabal Therapy us, and we lose the game. But I'm pretty happy with this one. We have one of our basics, which gives us the mana to float in response if our opponent does try and put a Magus of the Moon into play. And we can use that as our combo piece potential, which is a thing I love doing against Magus of the Moon decks. But let's see how explosive our opponent's turn 1 draw is. Unmasked targeting us. Alright. And they got rid of an Exhume. You don't see a lot of Exhumes these days, because so many people have got Psychic Frogs and things, and they can just chuck an Attractor in the bin and make the Exhume feel pretty bad. But our opponent is deep into the Reanimator plan. And showing us an Exhume, which is one of the ones they're less likely to keep anyway post-board, because it's 2 mana. Right, they took the Abrupt Decay. That tells me our opponent is on the Magus of the Moon plan, I believe. There is a Lotus Petal. I would like to get 1 turn before they Magus us. Alright, we do get to get 1 turn first. That means we have access to our forest here. And we do another Abrupt Decay. I absolutely love to see it. I am a touch concerned about an opposition agent. Seems like the best time. I have to have exactly Dark Ritual opposition agent here. Okay, our opponent's got 2 cards plus this swamp that they're getting. It's a regular swamp. No Badlands over there. Maybe they don't have the Magus plan. Maybe they are on the pivot. Just a Barragoyf. Yeah, I can kill that if I need to. It's quite large. I think I'm just going to take this out before we get into the weeds of it. We've got the graveyard very covered. I don't really want our opponent to have another Barragoyf. Do I care enough about... We have so many of these. So let's... Alright, our opponent's scooping the match and we're taking this Barragoyf out of their hand. Maybe they had a Barragoyf in hand there. But yeah, next turn we just go and get the Sylvan Scrying. It gets the Thespian stage and we're all good. Alright, so that's 4 rounds in the books. So we're currently 2-2, so we're trying to go for a positive record here. Let's see if we can nail it on the board. This hand needs 1 mana source to go off. It has a lot of protection. We don't have any disruption for what our opponent's doing. We're on the draw, and Urborg obviously is very good here. We can, turn 1, get an Urborg, but that doesn't really help us out. So realistically, when is this going to combo off? So we go turn 1, Thespian stage. Turn 2, Dark Depths. We maybe combo turn 2. Otherwise, it's turn 3. So we do nothing for the first 2 turns of the game. That might still be okay, because we have the protection and we're going to be sort of proactive. We're pretty cold to Wasteland style effects, though. I am going to keep this one. If our opponent's like a combo deck, then sure, they're going to get us, but that's where our sideboard of all these Null Rods and things is probably going to come in handy. We have lots of draws that can speed this up as well, but we have our pieces set. Just need to draw the most abundant thing in our deck. A basic mountain. A Goblin Welder. Alright, we're in Painter Town. This is a matchup that we are quite happy to face. Pre-board, it can be a bit awkward for us. So, what am I inclined to do here? If we play out the Thespian stage, we cast this Sylvan Scrying now for an Urborg. Turn 2, we can play a Hexmage out if that's going to be relevant, or we can Inquisition. But we can Inquisition next turn anyway. If we draw a piece of fast mana, we just get to go next turn, so I think we are better off just waiting a turn. Our opponent's not going to mess with our mana outside of Mages of the Moon effects, and they tend to be a sideboard thing from Painter, not main deck. So they're much better off having the Urza Saga ticking game 1. Ancient Tomb, are we going to see a Fable of the Mirrorbreaker? I believe a Vexing Bauble. This shuts off the Not of This World and also shuts off our Lotus Petal, but that's fine. There is a Painter's Servant. This gives our opponent 1 mana Vindicates for any permanent here, so they can just take out our lands and all sorts. Another Not of This World. That is what I would describe as a blank draw. So this is going to be Sylvan Scrying. We're going to get the Urborg. They got Spirit Guide Red Blast as their last 2 cards. That would be pretty good. They did not. So we're going to go get our Urborg. We're going to play our Urborg. And we're going to have a crack at our opponent's hand here and see what they're working with. Ideally, taking something like a Grindstone. Alright, just a Pyroblast. Opponent is down to just Mountain. Our odds here are pretty good. Obviously, Goblin Engineer is a disaster for us. Grindstone itself is a disaster. Keeping back this Welder. That means either they've got something they want to do with their Welder, or they're planning on popping the Bauble and having some looping ability. Right, 1 damage is not the amount of damage I care about in the least. There's the Mountain we knew about. They're going to play that last card from hand. They are, and it's a Golden Welder. They can crack this Bauble, and there's a real thing they get to do here. Okay, we're going to go black, black, make the Hexmage, and this means we get to play the Pithing Needle on Goblin Welder as well. Or we can name Grindstone. Right, there goes the Vexing Bauble. Let's get Pithing Needle down. So we lose to a top deck Grindstone if we name Goblin Welder. We lose to a Goblin Engineer probably most of the time anyway. A Goblin Engineer is just definitely lights out. I think it probably just has to be the Grindstone here. That at least gives us a chance to draw into a Boseiju and stuff. But naming Welder there can help us in some respects. It stops the Ensnaring Bridge coming down. But Ensnaring Bridge is easier for us to beat than the Grindstone, because the Grindstone just straight up kills us. This is also a matchup where we get to have a bunch of Null Rod effects. Alright, they would rather have their Vexing Bauble because they are in trying to draw a card mode. So they're looking for Goblin Engineer specifically. Actually, they need an artifact as well at this point. So they're looking specifically for Ensnaring Bridge, which is quite common as a one-off these days. And Urza Saga. Okay. Let's try and make a friend. Alright, our opponent's got nothing. Excellent. So we've got some good tools for this matchup. Let's have these Abrupt Decays in. Let's have these Null Rods in. Let's have these Collector Ouphes. Surgical Extraction can be useful as well, because our opponent is obviously doing some graveyard stuff. Pithing Needle is pretty good because it can name Welders, whereas the Null Rods and stuff are going to be on Grindstones, whatever. We do not really want Not of This World in this matchup, so that can get out of here. This isn't a matchup where we need to smash out our Null Rods super early, but we do need to have some mana to play around Blood Moon effects. The Hand Disruption is probably the least relevant thing here. So that goes, and we keep the needles. We've got a bunch of answers here. Sejiri Steppe can be useful. Not often, though, but it can be useful if they're bored in something like Dead and Gone. It's nice to have a one-of in there. The Ghost Quarter for hitting a Saga at the right moment is really good. And the Boseiju obviously blows up their artifacts. So there's no lands I really want to cut here. Sometimes I will cut the Sejiri Steppe. I don't think we're going to do that today, though. Let's just jam. Turn 1 discard, and then nothing. I think we can do better. 2 Abrupt Decays. The mana's play around a Blood Moon. Shooters for our combo. Am I getting rid of one of these Scryings? Am I getting rid of one of these Abrupt Decays? Or am I getting rid of the Needle? I'm definitely keeping one of each of these. It's a case of one of these threes goes. So this gets us the combo. You know, that's just a win right there. And I think Abrupt Decay is more flexible than the Needle, so I think it's going to be the Needle that goes here. Needle is good at answering multiple instances of something. Is this going to be a turn 1 Blood Moon? It is. Okay. We are looking for 8 of our bits of fast mana to do the job here. If our opponent thinks this is enough to beat us, then we'll be okay. Now, there are situations where we just sit here and this beats us down and we lose the game. But we have 9 cards we're drawing to that just answer this straight up. Would I rather have this Verdant Catacombs in play than this Thespian stage? I think so. Yeah, so Spirit Guides, Lotus Petals, or the Forest in our deck are great here. Urborg, that's not really the one we're after. So we can continue this one on. Our opponent doesn't seem to have much going on over there. They were just turn 1 Megas of the Moon. Should be good enough. Statistically, it shouldn't be, but sometimes it ends up being. I'll play this Urborg. The ideal is to have the Dark Depths in place, and when you kill this, you just go off. But we're pretty close to going off anyway with what we've got in play. Ring of Glory is a pretty cool one. You can give something haste. Very good with a whole bunch of things. Like all their welders and all that shenanigans.
Alright, our opponent's going to do half our life total.
So I think it's about 1 in 7 draws is good for us, roughly. Seaman Spirit Guide, doubling the clock. Powerful. A Lotus Petal, you say? Let's get that going. So, first things first, we kill this. Now we go and fetch our basic forest and our Bayou. Actually, do we even need to fetch the Bayou there? Probably not. So then we cast Sylvan Scrying, get Dark Depths, play Dark Depths, and now we have the combo ready to go. And we can go again relatively easily because we have another Sylvan Scrying. We can beat an Ensnaring Bridge if they like play Engineer with the Arena of Glory and then fire up the activate ability on it. That works for us. I think I need to put red mana into the Arena of Glory to make it work. Yeah. It exerts it, which means it doesn't untap next turn. What sort of hasty nonsense are we going to be looking at here? Yep, so here is the Engineer. I'm going to get the Ensnaring Bridge here. Use all your mana up, please, opponent. That's what I want to see. Now, they might be able to string together an actual win here, which would be awkward for us. We could have done a different line involving the Collector Ouphe rather than going for the win, but I think going for the win is good. Alright, there's a Painter. There's a Saga, 3 cards in hand. So they have to welder this in this turn. Let's take 2 here. Let's do our thing. So they're going to go and get the Painted Servant in, and they're going to Pyroblast our Dark Depths. That's what this has to be. Goodbye, Dark Depths. More Abrupt Decays, eh? So I would like to cast this Sylvan Scrying. We don't get to go off this turn is the problem. So we're going to get the Dark Depths. We play the Thespian stage this turn. We kill the Welder. We take 1, 2, 3. Next turn we play the Dark Depths, kill another guy. That's fine. We're obviously not having a great time into more Pyroblasts. But I think we have to kill the Welder here. Or the Engineer. As it is. And we can block the Ezra Saga token. I think they're coming in the red zone with all of their guys here. Yep. Another Red Blast, obviously pretty bad for us, but we can Abrupt Decay the Painted Servant to make the Red Blast fizzle. A Grindstone. Sure. Are they just going to fire it up straight away? They are indeed. I'll hit the scoop button and we'll go to game 3. Alright. Yep, I'm pretty happy with how we sideboarded here. I think this is a very good matchup. There is an argument to go lower on Needles in favour of some Inquisitions on the play. Just take out some of our opponent's better things. I can see having another Inquisition on the play. Take another Inquisition over the Sejiri Steppe. Our opponent didn't show us any sort of dead gone type stuff. And they've kept in their Pyroblasts, which probably means that's how they're planning on fighting this one, is by hitting our lands. Sadly, no action for Gloom this week. So what does this hand do? Turn 1, Thoughtseize. Turn 2, Null Rod. Yeah, just a green source gets us where we need to go. I'll keep this one. We also have one of our basics. We can get the other one using the Ghost Quarter if we need. Let's take a bite out of crime over there. What do you got? Painted Servant, Magus of the Moon, Seaman Spirit Guide, Soul Guide Lantern. I think we're going to take the Magus of the Moon here. Not a controversial choice, for sure. Mountain into Soul Guide Lantern. Goodbye, Thoughtseize. Verdant Catacombs. Perfect. This allows us to go and get our other basic to recover from Blood Moon. On that regards, our opponent can't grindstone us while this Null Rod is in play. There's a Mountain. There's a Painted Servant. We would like to play another Null Rod so our opponent can't just blast it and be fine. That is very much on my to-do list. There's another Mountain. And pass from our opponent. Cracking in for 1. 4 cards left in our opponent's hand. One of them is a Seaman Spirit Guide. We're going to see it played as a beta here. They're casting a Phyrexian Dragon Engine. In a turn, I'm going to crop rotate this Ghost Quarter. Go and get ourselves a Thespian stage. This way we free up more green mana if we need it. There's a Dark Depths. How do you like them apples, opponent? Because they have a Seaman Spirit Guide, we don't have a chance to play around a Pyroblast there. Although our opponent did F6 for our turn, so maybe we're supposed to just go for it there. Coming in with the team. What does this mean? I'm just going to take this. And then we'll make it in the end step. A Mountain. Now, they can't block, so they're attacking here anyway. Right, we're going to see a Pyroblast here. No, they got nothing. And we win the game. So, That is the end of the league. We finished with a 3-2, which was, you know, fine. The breaks we had were a little bit unfortunate in some sets. Let's talk about the matchups. So we lost against the blue-black sort of tempo deck. Game 1, they just kind of had a bunch of... They had their 1 of or 2 of Brazen Borrower at the right time, and that was just lights out for us. And that's going to happen, you know, whatever. The second game that they beat us, we basically had a line where we had to choose what we were playing around when we cast the crop rotation in terms of what we sacrifice. The days basically set us back, so we just needed to draw mana. So it was the least impactful thing to have. So that's the one we played into affecting us, and then we just never drew the land, and then eventually our opponent drew cards and beat us. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to draw the land and make the guy and win that game. But that just isn't how it materialized for us, and that's one of the things. And the variance is what makes Magic good. So that was our 0-2 there, and then we lost to the Storm deck, where we just couldn't string together the thing we needed for mana-wise for the second win there. But we did get fortunate to win the first game, so there is that. Let's have a look at the deck. So we did have more protection in this build, but I did feel not having the Once Upon a Time, we had to mulligan slightly more than I maybe would have liked. And we were a little bit slower than normal, but we did also have an absolutely fine time with the fact that we had, you know, a lot of disruption in our deck that was helpful. And then you just have, you know, this disruption suite to mess with in your sideboard. And, you know, you also have things like Sejiri Steppe and Ghost Quarter and Bojuka Bog. So you basically have the core of your deck over here, and then your protection slots get messed around with depending on the matchup, and just having more protection slots instead of having the Once Upon a Times, which Once Upon a Time, when you're running it, feels like you kind of need it, if that makes sense. What I will say is I have played more lands in some builds as well, like playing 1 Yawgmoth. I don't like Yawgmoth right now because it really helps some of the Cloud Post decks out and the Eldrazi decks, and you didn't really need to help those out, to be honest. So this build is something I'd be more than happy to play again. If I were to play, like the other build that I think is also fine, is, let's just move that way. If you swap 2 Inquisition of Kozilek and 1 Not of This World for 3 Once Upon a Times, that's sort of the other build I've been playing for the main deck configuration. But basically, like, this side of the deck is pretty much fixed in my mind. And I know there's a few other players out there who have basically been having this sort of 57 card selection of things and having a good time with it. Now, the trade-off between the 2 builds is that the 3 Once Upon a Times gives you a slightly quicker clock usually, because it means you're able to piece together the stuff that lets you go a bit quicker. So, you know, that piece of fast mana you need, or the creature to go for the Urborg kill instead, or, you know, the Urborg itself. You tend to do a lot more Hexmage wins with the Once Upon a Time build, just because, you know, you're digging 5 cards to find either of those, which makes life a lot easier. And obviously the best draws you tend to get are turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Hexmage Depths. Is kind of like the main draw. But you can go faster than that if you have double Lotus Petal, or you can do some shenanigans with Spirit Guides and other mana that way. But I'm pretty happy with how this build goes. Like, you can consistently churn out a positive record without any problem. And, you know, if you spike decent enough, you can do well and win some tournaments, get some money in your hands. Sideboard-wise, we didn't get to play with the Gloom. That's sad, but we didn't play against the white decks, which is good, because that's a horrible matchup. I don't think it's necessarily worth trying to fight that matchup too much. We were just playing a bit of Gloom because it's fun. Everything else seemed good. You know, the Abrupt Decays were decent for us. The 4 Null Rod effects is something I'm a big fan of as well. Maybe we don't need as much discard if we're having the 4 Inquisition main deck. But we did still board these in against the combo decks. But maybe these could be like a different piece of hate for those combo decks. I'm not saying we need to go more copies of this, but maybe we could ease off on these and maybe have some more protection against white decks perhaps. But yeah, that's it for this one. If you like this deck, check out my Patreon. I have a massive guide to this deck, and I update it every month with a discussion of the current metagame, so you can check that out. Like I said, I update it frequently. There's all sorts of things on there, like land sequencing, common plays, discussions of cards in the deck, not in the deck, all that sort of jazz. So if you like this deck, that's definitely one to check out. And there is a Discord. So my Discord is the Turbodepths Discord as well for Legacy, so by all means drop in and say hello. And why not like and subscribe if you haven't already? It does help the channel out and doesn't cost you anything. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.
If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon.
It has a free guide to budget Turbodepths as well as 3 tiers of support. A low cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel, a mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed Turbodepths guide that is updated every month as well as regular articles, and lastly the higher tier gives you all of the above as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.